A country which was rarely much more than a land of feuding tribes anyway, has collapsed into anarchy and bloodletting. The capital, Kabul, is under more or less permanent siege. The government forces are ranged against the fundamentalist Islamic movement, the Taliban, who now control half the country, with all sides blaming each other and neighbouring powers for perpetuating the violence. John Simpson reports from Kabul on the horror of the forgotten war.
Daybreak over Kabul, and the nighttime curfew is over. Things have been quiet. It's daylight that's dangerous. For the government soldiers, defending the city has become just a routine job. A dreary, frightening, destructive cycle of retaliation by besiegers and besieged.
None of those fighting which is taking place now anywhere in the world compared to this is more destructive. This is more destructive and causing more problems to a large number of population, and also being a very meaningless war, fighting one brother against another one in order to serve the interest of somebody from outside. So it's very meaningless.
The old royal palace looks out over the city. You can only get in now by climbing in through one of the main state apartments.
You have to be careful here or walking.
Once the king of Afghanistan governed his unruly country from here. Now it's just another part of the front line. Its corridors are a place for soldiers to shelter, sleep and defecate in. The endless faction fighting of the Afghans allows the nearby countries like Pakistan, India, Iran and Russia to work out their own rivalries here. The Afghans just provide the manpower and the venue for the war. The soldiers, untrained irregulars really, have nothing else to do but fight. There's no money to be earned outside the army. Several of these men are stoned. It's their way of getting through it all. As for the children in this devastated society, they scour the battlefields at the risk of their own lives to collect bits of shrapnel to sell for scrap. The government side, defending Kabul, gets its weapons from Russian sources mostly, spending 2/3 of its meagre income on buying them. Taliban forces besieging the city get some of their armaments courtesy of Pakistan. But after 20 years of continuous warfare, there's no shortage anyway. The fighting is deadlocked, and everyone knows it. But it carries on all the same. Maybe Afghanistan's neighbors prefer it that way. It keeps the country weak and preoccupied. Things have been pretty quiet today, says the soldier. He doesn't seem bothered by the explosions nearby. They've been firing rockets at us, he says, and we've been firing back, rocket for rocket. This is the front line in a war that's been almost completely forgotten. Some years ago, when the Russians were here, people used to demonstrate in the streets against the war in Afghanistan. The governments used to issue the sternest warnings to Moscow. But the Russians have been gone for 7 years now, and no one seems to care that the fighting is, if anything, worse than ever. Because it's no longer a battleground for the superpowers, it doesn't matter anymore.
If the world's supposed to be more interested in human rights and values, then why, after 14 years of war, have they forgotten Afghanistan? No one cares about the harshness of life for people here. No one cares about ending foreign interference in Afghan affairs. If they had, and foreign interference had been stopped and reconstruction work started, the war would have stopped by now, and people could get on with normal life, going to school or university instead of the front line.
In the wreckage of the city, President Rabbani's government is struggling to keep proper control. It's got a growing law and order problem, and its Islamic credentials are constantly challenged by the ultra-fundamentalist Taliban. As a result, it's decided to stage a show of toughness, both to deter violent crime and to demonstrate the Islamic principle of an eye for an eye. It's announced a public execution for midday. 3 government security men have been found guilty of murdering a shepherd. The penalty is death by hanging. It'll be the first public execution in Kabul for 4 years. The condemned men are brought to the gallows in an armoured personnel carrier. It's obviously going to be a disorganised affair. Some of the soldiers perched on the vehicle are smoking dope. It's like going back in time 200 years. The prisoners seem to be the calmest people here. A mullah reads out the execution order. One of the condemned men went to his death defiant and cracking jokes. Another tried desperately to get the words out that he was only being hanged because he wasn't rich, which was probably true. Altogether, it was an unpleasant, botched business, too hurried and unceremonious to have any dignity. The crowd felt it too and started getting angry. They'd have liked some last words from the gallows, some sense of occasion, the feeling of justice being seen to be done. As it was, the point of the whole affair was wasted. What was the reason for hanging these men in public?
These men were dangerous criminals. The court discussed their case for months, and in the end, we decided that they should be punished according to Islamic law in a way that would be a lesson to others. That's the point. Some of them were responsible for security in parts of the city and were part of the local mujahideen. That made it even more important to do the execution in public, as a lesson to everybody.